Was George Washington the real first president of the United States? Let's talk about that. Hello everyone, my name is Andy Yardley. I'm a high school history teacher out of Arkansas, and I'm here to teach you guys the things that they don't necessarily teach you in a high school history classroom. So let's get into it. So in today's episode, I'm going to be talking about George Washington, the first president of the United States. Some of you may be thinking, well, Andy, he was the first president of the United States, right? Well, that's what things like your high school history textbooks would have you believe. But that's not exactly true. You're often taught that George Washington was the first president of the United States, John Adams was the second, and so on and so forth all the way down the line. But what about the years prior to the U.S. Constitution? I mean, there's a whole, decade and a half in your U.S. history classrooms you just kind of go over without really getting into any deep discussion about it. Yes, George Washington was the first president. He was the first president under the U.S. Constitution. But most U.S. history classrooms don't really go into detail about that other 15 years of history that has more than just one president. Actually, there are several. Let's take a look at the think tank and talk about it. So yes, George Washington was the first president under the Constitution, but what about from 1775 to 1789? Who was running and leading the country at that point? Well, there's about 14 other individuals who have the title of President of the United States. And well, technically they were called President of the Congress. Out of these 14 people, some are repeats, some are signers of the Declaration of Independence, and others were people appointed and voted into that position. In this video today, we're going to discuss briefly all 14 people that were considered the presidents before the first U.S. president, George Washington. So to give a little context about where we're going through with this episode, we have to go actually back before the U.S. Constitution, all the way back to 1775, around the time of the First Continental Congress, which was a small group of delegates from the 13 original colonies that built together the Articles of Confederation, a baseline for how their government's going to work in terms of what laws or how they pass laws and who needs what money and who needs troops and all these other different things. And the Articles of Confederation were more of a wartime government than anything else. Thanks for that, think tank. Now, let's talk about some of the people that were involved in the presidency of the Congress. So you had 14 individuals who both wanted and did not want the responsibility of being president of Congress, and also under the Articles of Confederation, there was no executive branch. So the president of the Continental Congress, later called the Confederation Congress, had little to no power, so this wasn't necessarily a super prestigious job. There were some who really wanted it, others who only did it out of necessity, and some who were actually voted in who both did and did not like their position of power. So starting off our list of people who were president before George Washington was a guy by the name of Peyton Randolph. You see, Peyton Randolph served from September to October of 1774, and again in May 10th through May 24th of 1775. He was considered the first and third president of the Continental Congress. He actually played a major role in the American Revolution as he signed what was called the Continental Association, which was an official grievance and a boycott against the Intolerable Acts signed by Britain's Parliament. Without him, we probably would not have the American Revolution to this day. Second on our list is Henry Middleton, from October 22nd to October 26th of 1774. He is the second president of the Continental Congress, and he only served 4 days before resigning because he actually did not support declaring independence from Great Britain. Fun fact about him, most people at the time that were considered loyalists after the American Revolution was won by the American colonies, their punishment was pretty severe and grievous. If you were a known loyalist of Great Britain, you got all of your stuff taken away from you. How's that for good old-fashioned American policy? However, Henry Middleton did not have his stuff taken away because people recognized him as being a member of the Continental Congress, which saved him from having all of his stuff stolen. Very nice. Third on our list is John Hancock, who served from May 24th, 1775 to October 31st of 1777, and again on November 23rd, 1785 to June 5th of 1786. He was the fourth president of the Continental Congress and the fifth president of the Confederation Congress. More on that later. John Hancock is probably the most famous out of the Continental Congress presidents. He was the one who was responsible for the creation of the Declaration of Independence. Also, he is known for his comically large signature on the Declaration of Independence. As legend goes, it's said that he wrote his signature so large to say, quote, "I want King George to be able to read my handwriting without the use of his spectacles. I call that a sick American burn."
Awesome. Wow.
Aside from the creation of the Declaration of Independence, he was also the longest serving president of the Continental Congress, serving for a little over 2 years. He had a pretty important job. People really liked him for it. Considered very popular, not just among the members of Congress, but also to the American people. Good job, John Hancock. Next on our list is Henry Laurens, who served from November 1st, 1777 to December 9th, 1778. He was the fifth president of the Continental Congress. Laurens was a wealthy planter from South Carolina who owed his wealth to the family business of slave trading. Yeah, you see, Henry Laurens was not really the best guy. Being from South Carolina, and South Carolina being part of the southern colonies who's known for their slavery, him and the slave firm that he worked for had a confirmed 8,000 slaves that he had sold in his tenure working for the family business. A little bit of a stain on the American history, but it's important to understand the good, bad, and ugly. However, before his death at the Battle of Combahee, his son John Laurens tried to convince his father to free the family slaves. However, Henry could not bring himself to do so. It's really unfortunate. Would have been really interesting to see a person from the South be pretty gung-ho for the abolition of slavery so early in American history, but that could be another episode for another time. Fifth person on our list is probably the second most famous of the pre-Constitution presidents, by the name of John Jay, who served from December 10th, 1778 to September 27th, 1779. He was the sixth president of the Continental Congress. He had a hand in convincing the nation to adopt the U.S. Constitution with a series of essays that he wrote alongside James Madison and Alexander Hamilton. No, not the Lin-Manuel Miranda Alexander Hamilton. The real Scottish, Jamaican-born Alexander Hamilton. Those essays that the three men wrote together would eventually be compiled together to create the Federalist Papers. Who knew writing could be so cool and so American? Sixth on our list is a guy by the name of Samuel Huntington, who served from September 28th, 1779 to July 6th, 1781. He is considered the seventh president of the Continental Congress, and Samuel Huntington was one of the original signers of the Declaration of Independence as a delegate from Connecticut. He was asked to join the Connecticut delegation as he was outspokenly against the coercive acts passed by British Parliament. Aside from that, not a whole lot is known about Samuel Huntington's time part of the Continental Congress aside from being one of the original signers of the Declaration of Independence. He was not known for being super flashy and tended to keep to the background. Keep up the good work, introverts. Seventh on our list is one of my personal favorites, Thomas McKean, who served from July 10th to October 23rd, 1781. He was the eighth president of the Continental Congress, and his tenure as the president of Congress was relatively quiet. However, he did have some controversy as governor of Pennsylvania because he was known as both a stout Federalist and a staunch Democratic Republican, and he often would throw people off of the opposite party as part of the government while he was governor of Pennsylvania, which led to a lot of people thinking he was indecisive, temperamental, and just flat out rude. It is also believed that he was one of the original creators and practitioners of the spoils system in government. Again, more on that at a later date. Continuing down on the list, number 8, John Hanson, who served from November 5th, 1781 to November 3rd, 1782. He served as the 9th president of the Continental Congress, eventually becoming the first president of the Confederation Congress. John Hanson very strongly despised his position as president of the Continental Congress. You see, John Hanson thought that the position of President of Congress was tedious, menial, and wasn't a whole lot of prestige, and for the most part he was right. Again, as President of Congress during the Continental and Confederation era, President of Congress didn't have a whole lot of power. He was there to make sure that Congress didn't kill each other from time to time, and would very rarely sign documents to be signed into law. Not a very, important position at the time, but it was a cushy little job. Didn't really have to do much, except for keep people from squabbling like little children. Ninth on our list is Elias Boudinot. He served from November 4th, 1782 to November 3rd, 1783. So before we became a country, we didn't really, use the people to elect members of our Congress. Most states or colonies at the time sent delegations. Once we won the American Revolution and we started forming the Confederate government, then we started having the populace vote for who would be not only members of the Confederation Congress, but also who would be president of the Confederation Congress. Elias Boudinot was also an avid supporter and advocate for women's rights, and he would also be the first person appointed to the U.S. Mint during the presidency of George Washington. Way to go, Elias. Keep on minting. Number 10 on our list, Thomas Mifflin, who served from November 3rd, 1783 to November 30th, 1784. He's considered the third president of the Confederation Congress. Mifflin had one of the hardest jobs as president of the Confederation Congress. So after the American Revolution, there was a lot of people who didn't really see the need for Congress to continue. A lot of them believed that each individual state would kind of become its own federal government in some way, shape, or form. So when the war was over, many of the people called their delegates back home, which was kind of a problem because they still had to sign the Treaty of Paris and have it ratified by the Congress in order for it to go through. And if you don't remember or know, the Treaty of Paris was the treaty that America and Great Britain signed after the American Revolution. He found it very difficult to find people to come back in and put their names on the treaty in order to send it back to London. We struggled for a while as a nation. At the time, we'd been going on, a few years in this government, and we come across a series of rebellions. One being the Whiskey Rebellion, which George Washington, swiftly crushed, being the military man that he was. And the second most well-known one was the Shays Rebellion. People were not happy with the new taxes being levied on them for new businesses being started, and people started getting pretty antsy. Once his term was done, he was part of Pennsylvania's delegation to the Constitutional Convention. Number 11 on our list is also another really famous one. Richard Henry Lee, who served from November 30th, 1784 to November 4th, 1785. He's considered the fourth president of the Confederation Congress, and Lee had an important legacy during and after the American Revolution. So during the American Revolution, Richard Henry Lee was a delegate from Virginia along with another future well-known president, Thomas Jefferson. See, the problem was Massachusetts was trying to push for independence, and a lot of people didn't really support Massachusetts' decision, even though they believed that, it could potentially be something that happened. However, it was Richard Henry Lee who got the say-so from Virginia to go ahead and support their own resolution for freedom, and without him, we would have things like the Declaration of Independence, or even the American Revolution itself. He was very essential in the creation and formation of the United States that we know and love today. Richard Henry Lee, as president of Congress, did not levy any new federal taxes on the American people and brought forth the selling of land in the newly acquired Northwestern Territory to try and pay off war debts from the American Revolution. Unfortunately for Richard Henry Lee, that last part about the Northwestern Territory didn't work out so well. People were already squatting on that land, and Native Americans at the time refused to give up their claims to that land, which kind of made him paying off war debts with that land null and void. Number 12 on our list is Nathaniel Gorham, who served from June 6, 1786 to February 2, 1787. He was the sixth president of the Confederation Congress, and Gorham also had a quiet time as president. See, Gorham was a little on the weird side. Gorham, even though he had a quiet time as president, also meant that he kind of said and did whatever he really wanted. During his time as president of Congress, he had a conversation with Alexander Hamilton, which basically stated that Prince Henry of Prussia should and could become the next president or king of the United States. Little weird. Number 13, Arthur St. Clair, served from February 2nd to October 5th, 1787. As the 7th President of the Confederation Congress, St. Clair had his work cut out for him. During his tenure as president, St. Clair had to deal with Shays' Rebellion, which was an armed uprising of the American citizens who had a problem with the new taxes being levied on businesses in order to pay off increasing debts. Toward the end of his term, Congress began construction on the U.S. Constitution that would eventually eradicate the Articles of Confederation. See, Arthur St. Clair kind of had the best of both worlds. He was about to have his job completely, axed, while at the same time he needed his position because, well, Shays' Rebellion happened. So he was both needed and eventually not needed at the same time. What a way to be versatile. And finally on our list, Cyrus Griffin, who served from January 22nd, 1788 to March 2nd, 1789. He's the 8th and final president of the Confederation Congress. Griffin had a cushy time as president because his position was being done away with, which made way for George Washington to become the first president of the United States under the new U.S. Constitution. So there you have it, folks. List of all the people who were president of the United States before George Washington. If you liked what you've seen and you want to know more historical facts, both about the United States, world, or ancient history, stay tuned for future episodes where I cover a wide variety of weird, interesting, and untaught things in the realm of history. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.